The harvest bells of St. Aldrich's had not yet finished ringing when the carriage wheels stopped turning in the mud outside Fenwick Green, and the man who stepped down from it wore no crest.
The prince is no more. From today, I am just a guard.
No crown, no silk, only wool. Rough spun, guard's wool, still smelling of the palace stables. Tom Reeve, he told the innkeeper, hand extended, voice steady as a man who had practiced the lie in a mirror 100 times. Newly assigned to Windsor grounds. Come to see the harvest fair, same as anyone. No one in that village square, not the baker calling out prices, not the children chasing a runaway goose, not the sharp-eyed schoolmistress standing on the church steps with a ledger under her arm, had any reason to look twice at a guard in borrowed clothes. They did not know his real name was Edmund, that in 11 months, should his grandmother's health continue its quiet decline, he would be crowned King of England, that every woman in the capital with a marriageable daughter had already begun rehearsing curtsies in his honour. He had come to Fenwick Green to escape all of that, to find, just once, someone who might look at him and not the throne behind him. He did not yet know her name. He did not yet know she was the one person in England who could destroy everything he was pretending to be, or save it. What happened between them that harvest season would stun the entire kingdom? Fenwick Green smelled of crushed apples and wood smoke, the whole square strung with late summer garlands for the harvest fair. Edmund, Tom, he reminded himself, Tom, moved through the crowd the way Captain Redbourne had drilled him, shoulders loose, eyes down more than up, a guard's wages jingling thin in his pocket instead of a prince's allowance. It was almost pleasant being no one. He noticed her before he meant to. The schoolmistress on the church steps was arguing, not loudly, but with the particular quiet fire of someone who had learned that shouting rarely won anything. A man in a steward's coat stood before her, arms folded, unmoved. "The rents are due at Michaelmas," the steward was saying. "The estate cannot subsidise a schoolhouse with 12 pupils and a leaking roof, Miss Combe. 12 pupils who can read their own names because of that roof," she said. "Give me until spring. I'll find the funds myself if I must beg every farmer in the parish. Begging is not a plan. It has served better plans than pride, sir." Edmund found himself smiling before he caught it. The steward walked off unmoved, and the woman, Miss Combe apparently, exhaled hard enough to stir the ribbon at her collar, then turned and nearly collided with him. "I beg your pardon," Edmund said, steadying a basket she nearly dropped. She looked at him properly for the first time. Travel-worn coat, guard's boots, nothing that marked him as anything but ordinary, and something in her shoulders eased, as if his plainness were itself a relief. "You're new," she said. "Windsor doesn't usually send its guards wandering this far from the gates." "I like harvest fairs," he said. It was, at least, true. Tom Reeve, Rosalind Combe, a small, wary smile. "Well, Mr. Reeve, if you've nothing pressing, the goose has escaped again, and I could use a second pair of hands that don't outrank me." He laughed, genuinely, for the first time in weeks, and went after the goose. By the time they'd cornered it behind the cider stall, breathless and laughing, he understood something had shifted. She had not curtsied, she had not simpered, she had handed him a squawking bird and called him useful, and it was the finest compliment he'd received in a year. "You're not from the palace originally," she observed, watching him work. "You don't carry yourself like the others." "No," he said carefully, "I came to it sideways. So did I, with teaching." She studied him a moment longer than necessary. "Perhaps that's why the goose trusts you." He did not correct her. He told himself the lie was small and harmless, and would not matter for long. He was wrong on all 3 counts. Over the following fortnight, Tom Reeve found reasons to be assigned to the Fenwick Road with suspicious regularity, a convenience Captain Redbourne noted with a raised eyebrow but did not report. "You're meant to be guarding the eastern gate, sir," Redbourne said one morning, not quite masking his amusement. "The eastern gate is guarded adequately without me, and the Fenwick schoolhouse requires a royal guard's protection because I said so, Josiah." Edmund's tone was light, but there was enough of the future king in it that Redbourne let the matter drop, muttering something about this ending badly under his breath. It was, Edmund had to admit, a fair prediction. He learned Rosalind Combe the way a man learns a country he intends to love, slowly, thoroughly, without meaning to. She taught 12 children in a single drafty room, paid for chalk from her own thin wages, and walked 2 miles each way to save the coach fare for books instead. She had raised her younger brother Peter alone since their parents' deaths, and she wore her exhaustion the way other women wore jewelry, as though it were simply part of the ensemble, nothing to remark upon. "You ask a great many questions for a guard," she told him one afternoon, as he helped her stack readers onto a shelf that had seen better decades. "I find you interesting to question." "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It rarely is, with me." She let it go, though he suspected she was cataloguing his evasions the way she catalogued everything, patiently, precisely, for later use. The trouble arrived from London on a Tuesday, in the shape of Sir Alaric Pennington Vane. He came to Fenwick under the pretence of an estate inspection, but his true purpose showed itself within the hour. Quiet conversations with the steward, a notation in a leather ledger, a long look at the schoolhouse as though measuring it for a coffin. "The closure order will be signed by month's end," he told the steward, just loudly enough to be overheard by a passing washerwoman who carried the news to the village within the hour. "The estate cannot be seen indulging a schoolmistress's charity project when the Crown's own finances are under such scrutiny." Rosalind heard it second-hand, by the well, and Edmund watched something in her go very still. "They'll close it," she said that evening, when he found her sitting alone on the church steps long after the fair lanterns had guttered out. 12 children, Tom, Peter among them, and I cannot fight a ledger with nothing but a ledger of my own." He wanted, badly, to tell her that a word from him, one word, spoken in his true voice, not Tom's, could end Pennington Vane's scheme before it began. He said nothing. "You look as though you're carrying something heavy," she said instead, studying him in the dark. "I am," he admitted. "I only wish I could set it down." She did not press him, but she moved an inch closer on the step, and for a moment that was answer enough for both of them. The closure order did not arrive by month's end. Rosalind learned this from the steward himself, who delivered the news with the flustered confusion of a man overruled by someone above his understanding. "The estate has reconsidered," he said, shuffling papers that clearly contradicted everything he'd said a fortnight prior. "The schoolhouse roof will be repaired at the Crown's expense. A new stipend has been arranged for your wages, Miss Combe, and books besides." Reconsidered by whom? I couldn't say. He said it the way men say things they have been expressly forbidden to explain. She should have simply been grateful. 12 children would keep their letters. Peter would keep his lessons. The leaking roof would finally stop staining the readers she'd paid for out of her own pocket. Instead, walking home past the guardhouse that evening, she found herself doing what she always did with anything that did not add up. She began asking questions. She started with small things. The way Tom Reeve's boots were good leather beneath the mud, better than a guard's wages could easily explain. The way Captain Redbourne addressed him with a deference that bordered on something else entirely, quickly corrected, as though remembered too late. The way, when she'd once mentioned the closure order in passing, something in his face had gone carefully, deliberately blank, the face of a man hiding an opinion, not a man without one. She found him at the schoolhouse the next morning, inspecting the new roofing timber with the proprietary interest of someone who had personally arranged for it. "You did this," she said, without preamble. "Did what?" "Don't." Her voice was quiet, which frightened him more than shouting would have. "I have spent 2 weeks watching a common guard move through this village like he owns the ground beneath it." The steward reconsidering. The captain's deference. "This," she gestured at the fresh timber, arriving within days of a closure order that should have taken the Crown's own council months to overturn, if they bothered at all. Edmund felt the lie reach the end of its road. Here, now, in the honest morning light, with her eyes steady and unafraid on his, he could have told her everything. The words assembled themselves in his throat. "My name is not Tom. I am the Prince of England, and I came here pretending to be nothing so that someone, once, might want me for something more than a crown." He opened his mouth, and then, from the church path, he saw Sir Alaric Pennington Vane watching them both with the sharp, assessing patience of a man building a case. The words died in Edmund's throat. Not from cowardice, he told himself, from caution. A confession made under Pennington Vane's eye would become a weapon by nightfall. "I have some influence," he said instead. Weak, insufficient. He heard it land that way even as he spoke it. "More than my rank suggests, that is all I can tell you." Rosalind studied him for a long moment, the particular silence of someone recalculating everything they'd believed about a person. "That," she said quietly, "is not an answer either." She walked back into the schoolhouse and did not look back. She did not speak to him again for 6 days. It was not dramatic. No scenes, no accusations shouted across the village square. Rosalind Combe simply became unavailable in the particular, thorough way of a woman who had decided a matter for herself and did not require further discussion. She was polite when their paths crossed. She was occupied when he called at the schoolhouse. She sent Peter to fetch her books rather than fetch them herself. Edmund told himself this was tactical prudence, that with Pennington Vane circling the village asking pointed questions about the guard who takes such an interest in Miss Combe's affairs, any dramatic confession now would only hand his cousin ammunition. He told himself a great many reasonable things. None of them made the 6 days easier. "You look," Redbourne observed, arriving with dispatches Edmund didn't read, "like a man who has made a significant error and is choosing not to correct it." "I'm protecting her." "Are you certain," Redbourne said, with the particular bluntness permitted to men who have known a prince since childhood, "that you're not protecting yourself? A confession risks her rejecting the crown. Silence only risks her rejecting the man." Edmund had no answer for that, which was, he suspected, its own answer. He found her on the 7th evening at the well behind the schoolhouse, drawing water for the kettle, Peter's cough audible through the open window behind her, a rattling, unwell sound that made Edmund's chest tighten before he'd even reached her. "He's caught a fever," Rosalind said, before he could ask. Her voice was flat with exhaustion, not anger. "The physician says it's nothing dangerous, yet." She set the bucket down harder than necessary. "I don't have the coin for laudanum if it worsens. I don't have the coin for very much, as it happens, whatever mysterious stipends the Crown sees fit to arrange behind my back." "Rosalind, I am not asking you to explain yourself, Tom." The name came out with an edge now, deliberate, a small blade. "I have decided. I don't require the truth from a man who won't offer it freely. I only require that you stop appearing at my door as though nothing has changed, when we both know something has." "Something has changed," he said quietly. "I have not stopped." He stopped himself. "Loving you" rose in his throat and felt, suddenly, like the one true thing he had left to give her, and also the one thing he had no right to say while still wearing a false name. "I have not stopped being someone who wants to help you," he finished instead, and heard, even as he said it, how thin it sounded beside what he'd almost confessed. Rosalind looked at him a long moment in the fading light. "Wanting to help isn't the same as being honest," she said, and picked up the bucket and left him standing alone at the well, with Peter's cough drifting through the dark behind her. Peter's fever broke on the 2nd night and returned worse on the 3rd. By the time the physician came again, his voice had lost its earlier calm. "The lungs are involved now," he told Rosalind in the hallway, low enough that he thought the boy wouldn't hear, forgetting that fevered children hear everything. "I can bring down the fever with what I have, but if it worsens further, he needs medicine I don't carry, and I don't know that Fenwick has it to be found." Rosalind sat by her brother's bed until dawn, doing sums in her head that never came out even. The stipend not yet paid, the physician's fee already owed, the nearest apothecary, with the proper drafts, 2 hours' ride toward London. She did not send for Tom. She told herself this firmly, several times, as though repetition might make it true. She had decided she did not require him. He came anyway. Word of the boy's illness had reached him by midday. Fenwick was a village that kept few secrets from a man who'd made himself useful to half its residents, and he arrived at her door with a physician's bag borrowed from the palace stores and a horse lathered from riding faster than any guard's business would ever justify. "I don't need," Rosalind began, opening the door, exhaustion and pride warring visibly on her face. "I know," Edmund said. "I came anyway." He did not wait for permission. He set the bag on the table, and the draughts within it, proper ones, the kind kept for royal children, not village boys, worked within hours, where the physician's thinner remedies had not. By evening, Peter's breathing had eased. By midnight, he slept without the rattle that had frightened them both. Rosalind found Edmund afterward, sitting exhausted in her small kitchen, and for the first time in a week did not turn away. "Where does a guard come by medicine like that?" she asked quietly. Not an accusation now. Just tired, honest curiosity, with the fight gone out of it. He might have answered her then, might have, at last, told her everything, in the safety of that small dark kitchen with her brother finally sleeping upstairs. Instead, the answer came from the doorway, in Sir Alaric Pennington Vane's voice. "An excellent question, Miss Combe." He stood in the open door, a folded paper in one gloved hand, his smile thin as a blade's edge. "Perhaps I might assist. I have here a letter, intercepted, I'm afraid, from a correspondent in London, suggesting you have known your guard's true identity for some weeks, and have been rather artfully positioning yourself to benefit from it. Fortune-seeking, the letter calls it. A rather ambitious scheme for a schoolmistress." "That is a lie," Rosalind said, rising, colour draining from her face nonetheless. Not from guilt, but from the particular horror of being accused before she understood the accusation. "Is it?" Pennington Vane's eyes moved, deliberately, to Edmund. "Perhaps your Highness would care to clarify which part." The word landed in the small kitchen like a dropped plate. Rosalind turned to Edmund very slowly. "Highness," she said. There was no more hiding it, and Edmund, looking at her face in that unforgiving moment, found he did not want to. "My name is Edmund," he said. "Edmund Fairley Vane. I am heir to the throne of England, and I have lied to you for 6 weeks, and I am sorrier for it than I have words to say." Rosalind said nothing. Her silence was worse than any accusation Pennington Vane could have manufactured. "The letter is a forgery," Edmund continued, turning on his cousin before she could speak, fury replacing shame as the more useful emotion. "Miss Combe has never known my name until this instant. You have just watched her learn it, Alaric, in front of a witness who will attest to her honest shock should the matter ever reach my grandmother's counsel." "A convenient claim," Pennington Vane said, though something in his composure had thinned. "Not convenient, true, and unlike your letter, mine requires no forged hand to support it." Edmund's voice had shed every trace of Tom Reeve now. It carried, instead, the flat, unhurried authority of a man who had simply been waiting, for once, to use it. "The estate steward keeps honest ledgers, Alaric. Every correspondence regarding the school stipend, in my hand, dated and witnessed. Set your forgery beside them, and let my grandmother's counsel judge which document lies." 3 days later, at the harvest inspection held on the estate lawn, the whole village present, along with half the London court come to observe the Crown's autumn accounts, Pennington Vane's forged letter was laid beside the steward's honest paper trail, and the difference in hands was unmistakable to anyone who troubled to look. "You forged evidence against an innocent woman to discredit my grandson," the Dowager Queen said, in a voice that required no volume to carry across the lawn, "because he chose to know her honestly before choosing her at all. I find myself, Alaric, rather more impressed by his judgment than yours." Pennington Vane's influence at court did not survive the season. Rosalind, standing at the lawn's edge with Peter's hand in hers, watched the future King of England cross the grass toward her in front of the entire assembled court, and did not curtsy. "You still owe me an apology," she said, "for the goose." "I owe you considerably more than that," Edmund said. But I'll start there, if you'll let me. The wedding, when it came the following spring, was not held in London's Grand Cathedral, as court tradition demanded. It was held at Fenwick Green, beneath the same harvest garlands strung anew, with 12 schoolchildren scrubbed and solemn in the front pew, and Mrs. Winlow's cakes crowding every table the village could spare. "It isn't proper," the Dowager Queen observed, though she said it while smiling, and wore the finest silk anyone in Fenwick had ever seen. "No," Rosalind agreed, "but it's honest. I find I prefer it." The Queen had insisted on one further matter before the vows were spoken, that Rosalind's school become the foundation stone of a new royal charter for parish education, with Rosalind herself named its first director. Not a bride absorbed quietly into palace life, but a woman given a kingdom's worth of schoolhouses to save, exactly as she'd once saved her own. Edmund watched her sign the charter with the same steady hand that had once handed him a squawking goose and called him useful, and understood, finally, what he had come to Fenwick Green pretending to find. He had not needed to become someone else to be loved. He had only needed, once, to be truly seen. The kingdom, as promised, was thoroughly stunned.